welcome. Tonight, you're in a quiet place where nothing is rushed and nothing is expected of you. Here, every story is told slowly, like a warm light fading into evening, made especially for overthinking minds and tired hearts. So take a breath. Let the day slip a little further away. You don't have to do anything. Just listen, relax, and let this peaceful sleep story guide you gently toward rest. You are safe here. You are welcome here, and this moment is only for you. The night has reached the quiet hour, the time when even the clocks seem to soften their ticking, and the streets exhale whatever noise the day left behind. Somewhere in the center of the city, beneath tall buildings that stand like gentle guardians of the dark, a tram waits on its tracks. It rests beneath a pale street lamp, its windows glowing with a soft golden light, as though the vehicle itself is half asleep. You are standing nearby, wrapped in the calm of the night. The air is cool, not cold, just crisp enough to carry the faint scent of rain that passed earlier in the evening. Pavements shine slightly, reflecting the sleepy glow of distant shop signs and the dim constellations above the rooftops. All around, the city is quieter than it ever dares to be during the day, and that calm begins to draw your breath into the same unhurried rhythm. The tram doors open with the gentlest sigh. Inside, the space feels warm and welcoming. Polished wooden seats, soft amber lights, and tall windows showing glimpses of the silent world outside. You step into the carriage, and your footsteps are surprisingly soft, as if the floor has learned over years of travel to absorb every sound kindly. There are no crowds, no rush, no urgency, just a long, comfortable tram stretching forward, ready to glide through sleeping neighborhoods, quiet squares, and slow-moving streets. You find a seat beside a large window. The seat feels worn in the nicest way, as though many peaceful journeys have shaped it. Outside the window, a few leaves move lazily in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a single dog barks once, then settles again. The world returns to stillness. The driver is unseen, but you sense a steady, thoughtful presence at the front. Someone who understands that this tram is more than transportation. It is a moving pocket of night, carrying those who need a gentle place to rest, to think quietly, or to simply let their minds soften. The tram bell rings softly, not sharp, but rounded and kind, and the carriage begins to move. The city drifts by at a dreamlike pace. Streetlights pass like slow golden pulse beats. Shadowed trees sway delicately along quiet boulevards. Every turn is smooth, every sound softened into a reassuring hum. The gentle rhythm of wheels along metal creates the kind of steady, repetitive sound that feels almost like a lullaby, something your mind can safely follow without effort. You notice that with every passing block, your shoulders sink just a little more. Thoughts that were busy earlier begin to stretch out, yawn, and settle. There is nothing to solve here, nothing demanding your attention, only the promise of a slow journey through a sleeping city, where the night holds space for every wandering thought to finally rest. The midnight tram continues forward, unhurried, patient, peaceful, as if it knows exactly where dreams begin. The tram glides forward as though it has practiced the art of moving quietly for decades. You feel the faintest vibration beneath your seat, not jarring, not intrusive, just a calm, steady heartbeat that runs through the carriage like a thread of comfort. The wheels hum along the tracks, the soft rhythm building into a background sound that seems perfectly designed to quiet the mind. Outside the window, the city opens gradually, as if night itself is gently pulling back curtains. At first, you pass through the old town. Tall brick buildings lean carefully toward one another, their windows soft with dim interior light. Curtains sway slightly. Balcony plants rest under droplets of rain. A cat sits poised on a railing, watching the tram glide by with slow, blinking eyes, as if it knows this ride is different from ordinary journeys. The streets here are empty, but not lonely. They feel like pages in a book that have been read many times, familiar, peaceful, and cherished. The tram slows as it approaches a small station platform. The sign hanging overhead swings gently in the breeze, squeaking just once, a quiet, tired sound that seems to yawn with the night. The doors open again with that same gentle sigh. For a moment, you expect someone to board, but instead, the platform remains still. A single bench rests beneath the sign, and next to it, a small abandoned umbrella leans like a quiet memory against the wall. Perhaps someone forgot it earlier in the evening. Perhaps they will return someday. Or perhaps it will simply remain there, part of the night scenery, companion to the lamppost and the drifting moths. The tram waits without rushing, as if giving time itself permission to linger. You notice how unusual it feels to be in a place where nothing is pressing forward. No announcements, no hurried steps, no flashing screens, just calm. Eventually, the bell chimes softly again. The doors close. The tram resumes its graceful glide. Inside the carriage, the light remains warm, almost golden, illuminating the polished wood, the softly patterned seats, and the subtle reflections in the window glass. You see your face there faintly, superimposed over the passing city, calm, thoughtful, unhurried. For once, your reflection does not appear busy or anxious. It simply rests. As the tram turns, you enter a narrow street lined with cafes and bookshops. Their signs hang quietly above shuttered doors. Through one window, you glimpse rows of books stacked neatly, like sleeping stories waiting to be awakened by daylight. Through another, tiny fairy lights glow inside empty chairs and tables, still decorated with napkins folded carefully, as though the cafe itself is practicing patience. A soft whisper of steam rises from a vent nearby, vanishing into the night. Raindrops, left from the evening shower, slowly slide along awnings and rooftops. The tram hums along, the movement so smooth that you barely notice time passing. As you breathe in, the air inside feels faintly scented with wood polish and something like old leather, not overpowering, simply part of the memory the tram carries with it. You imagine how many nights it has quietly journeyed through this city, unnoticed by the rush of daytime life, but deeply familiar to those who have discovered its peaceful existence. Another station appears, tucked beside a small park. Here trees arch over the benches like protective arms. A narrow fountain trickles softly in the center, continuing its own slow rhythm. Beneath its edge rests a scattering of fallen leaves, arranged by nature into quiet patterns. This time, someone does board. A man in a long coat steps onto the tram, though he moves so silently that it barely disturbs the air. He takes a seat several rows ahead, near the middle. His shoulders are relaxed. His head rests slightly against the glass. He does not speak, does not turn, as if he too has entered into the language of silence shared by the midnight ride. You realize something gentle and extraordinary. Everyone who rides this tram seems to understand its purpose. Not spoken, not written anywhere, just known. It is a place where thoughts are allowed to slow down, where the mind isn't expected to keep up with anything. A place where every passing scene unfolds not to demand attention, but to quietly cradle it. The tram moves again out of the park district into a broader avenue that stretches forward like a ribbon under streetlights. Here, buildings become slightly taller, windows farther apart. The night widens, the tracks curve gently along a canal, and the water beneath reflects shimmering fragments of gold and silver. You watch reflections pool and scatter every time the tram glides over a joint in the track. Somewhere, a clock tower chimes once, a soft, friendly sound echoing through the rooftops. Not alarming, not insistent, more like the night clearing its throat before continuing to speak. You find yourself breathing with the rhythm of the wheels now. Slow glide, soft hum, quiet turn, gentle glide again. A thought drifts through your mind, the kind of thought that appears when you finally pause. How many places like this exist, quietly, without announcement? Places whose only role is to give space, space to feel, space to release, space to simply be present. The midnight tram seems to answer without words. It gives another steady, reassuring hum. Ahead, the avenue widens into a roundabout lit by a soft halo of lamps. In the center stands a statue, not grand or imposing, just a simple figure of a person seated with a book on their lap. Their expression carved in stone is serene, as if the sculptor wanted to remind everyone who passed that peace itself can be a destination. The tram glides around the statue slowly, respectfully, and continues on toward a quieter district. The scenery shifts again. Now come residential areas, rows of houses with tiny gardens. Some windows glow gently behind lace curtains. Others remain dark, suggesting peaceful sleep within. A wind chime tinkles somewhere, letting out delicate musical threads into the night air. The tram slows once more at a modest platform. A woman steps on this time, wrapped in a shawl, hair gently tucked behind her ear. She carries nothing except a small notebook, pressed softly against her chest. She sits across the aisle from you, opens the notebook, and simply holds a pen poised over the page, but she doesn't write. She just gazes quietly out the window, allowing the rhythm of the journey to soften whatever thoughts she brought with her. It strikes you. The tram is like a moving sanctuary, not a place of excitement, not a place of entertainment, but a place of rest. The driver rings the bell again, barely above a whisper. The tracks ahead shimmer faintly with moisture. Soon the tram enters an older quarter where cobblestones line the street. The sound beneath the carriage becomes subtly different, still soft, but with a faint, calming cadence. A rhythmic echo, a heartbeat wrapped in nostalgia. You lean back, feeling your body growing heavier in the best way. Muscles loosen, your shoulders ease. The seat cradles you gently. You watch the city reveal its nighttime secrets. A tiny bakery with its oven cooling down, faint warmth still glowing in the doorway. A tailor shop with spools of thread lined carefully like little constellations. A music shop where a single violin rests in the display, bathed in lamplight. Everything in the night seems slower, intentional, tender. The tram approaches a small bridge, and for a moment the world opens wide. Beneath the bridge, the canal stretches into darkness dotted by reflections of stars. The tram glides across with barely a sound, and you sense a strange, beautiful feeling, like floating. There is no rush to the destination, no announcements telling you where you must go next. Just the soft understanding that every moment here is enough. A memory drifts quietly through you, of nights when your thoughts ran too fast, when every worry felt like it needed solving immediately. But here, the worries seem to recognize that this is not their place. They become like sleepy passengers themselves, choosing to sit quietly, content to rest for a while. The tram continues through the city like a calm thread sewing together quiet neighborhoods. Another stop, another breath. The man in the coat gets off, his movements still unhurried. He pauses on the platform for a moment, as if to thank the night itself. Then he walks gently down a path that leads towards softly lit houses. The tram doors close behind him. The bell rings and the world shifts again. You realize something else. This tram doesn't merely travel through the city. It reveals the version of the city that only appears once the world has finally learned how to be gentle. The woman with the notebook smiles faintly now, as though an invisible knot of thoughts has slowly loosened. She writes a single line, just one, closes the notebook, and rests her hands quietly atop it. The tram glides along another street adorned with ivy-covered walls. Lanterns guide the way, flickering with a kindness that feels almost old-fashioned. Somewhere, an open window releases the faint, comforting smell of chamomile tea. The air itself seems calmer the farther you travel. It becomes clear. Part of the mystery of the midnight tram is not where it goes, but how it changes the spaces it passes through. It doesn't rush, it doesn't push, it softens. As the tram rounds another gentle corner, you catch sight of something ahead, a long boulevard lined with trees whose branches meet overhead, forming a natural archway. Tiny drops of dew glimmer along the leaves, catching the lamplight like scattered silver threads. The tracks run perfectly down the middle, like a quiet path, meant only for those willing to travel slowly. When the tram enters this shaded passage, the world seems to grow even more serene. The sounds become delicate, the hush of wind, the whisper of branches, the soft purring of the wheels. The city withdraws to a respectful distance, allowing you to travel through a place that feels almost separate from time. You feel as though this tram might travel forever, not to escape the city, but to show you its gentlest heart. Your breaths grow deeper, your thoughts become lighter, easier to hold, and as part one of the journey reaches its peaceful close, the midnight tram glides forward, deeper into the sleeping city, carrying you softly into the stillness that waits ahead. The tram rolled on as quietly as a drifting cloud, its gentle rhythm becoming something almost musical. Not a song with notes, but a slow and peaceful pattern, the kind the mind recognizes without effort, the kind that settles beneath thoughts and tells them, very softly, you can rest now. Outside, the city stretched onward in long, calm lines of rooftops and silent crossroads. The lamps above the streets glowed like constellations, brought gently down to earth. Every corner looked as if it had paused mid-breath, like it wanted to give the night as much quiet space as possible. Inside the tram, the air remained still and warm, not heavy, not dense, just gently comforting, the way a blanket feels on a cool evening. The narrator, that quiet presence guiding the ride, didn't rush. Words flowed the way night air flows through slightly opened windows, soft, unhurried, carefully placed where they would calm, not stir. You remained seated comfortably, your body slowly adjusting to the rhythm, your shoulders naturally lowered. Your breathing matched the motion's slow glide, slow breath, slow thought. The tram curved along its line, passing an old library at the corner of a courtyard. Its tall windows revealed shelves stacked floor to ceiling, pages resting peacefully in the dark. Not a book rustled, not a chair shifted. It felt as if the entire place understood nighttime, understood that there are hours meant not for doing, not for deciding, but simply for being. The tram's reflection slid across the glass and disappeared again as it moved past, and somewhere inside, a soft understanding appeared. Not everything asks for attention. Not every thought needs to be solved tonight. The city wasn't worried about anything, and somehow that calm was contagious. A gentle breeze rose outside and brushed the trees in the nearby square. Leaves shimmered slightly, then rested again, as if the night itself had tugged them back into place. The tram slowed for a moment as it approached an intersection. Not because there was traffic, the streets were beautifully still, but because slowing seemed like the polite thing for the tram to do. It hummed softly, waiting, letting silence stretch out into something peaceful. On the corner stood an old clock tower. Its face glowed faintly with soft yellow light. Its hands moved with great patience, not concerned with minutes, not counting seconds, just gliding slowly from one mark to the next. Time in the sleeping city didn't seem like something urgent. It felt spacious, gentle, like it was here simply to remind everything that the night was long enough to rest, long enough to breathe, long enough to let busy thoughts fade into background whispers. The tram continued forward. Inside, the narrator's voice described the quiet surroundings the way one describes a familiar dream. The stitched patterns on the tram seats, the soft gleam along the metal rail, the faint scent of night air that drifted in each time the doors had opened earlier in the route. Everything about the carriage felt like it belonged to someone who cared deeply about comfort, even if no one ever said so out loud. A map at the front showed the stops along the road, all connected by a graceful looping line. The names of those stops sounded like places invented specifically for peaceful thoughts. Harbor of Lights, Moonbridge Crossing, Quiet Row, the Garden at Midnight. No urgency in any of them, no sharp edges. Just gentle destinations designed more for the imagination than for travel. The tram approached a long bridge over a river that moved as slowly as the story itself. Water reflected the sky, only slightly disturbed by ripples that shimmered like soft silk. Lamp posts lined the bridge at evenly spaced intervals. Their reflections in the water stretched like golden ribbons, straight at times, then gently bending with the current. The tram glided forward, its reflection floating beneath it, doubling the sense of movement. Above the bridge, the city eased even deeper into calm. There were rooftops like sleeping hills, balconies where potted plants rested in the dark, curtains drawn slightly aside to let night breeze whisper through. Everything had that quiet sense of purpose. Rest now, think later, sleep first. The narrator spoke about the quiet neighborhoods ahead, the ones where bakeries would slowly wake at dawn, and where cafes would warm their ovens before the streets even thought about stirring. But that time felt far away, comfortably distant, wrapped safely in tomorrow. Tonight belonged to stillness. The tram slid off the bridge and into a district where the architecture changed slightly. Buildings grew more rounded, more soft at the edges, as though even the bricks had learned how to relax. There was a small park shaped like a crescent moon. Benches curved along its paths, gathering around a central fountain that whispered quietly to itself. The fountain didn't spray upward, it simply flowed downward like a gentle sigh, the water circling slowly before disappearing again beneath the stone. It was the kind of place where late evening thoughts could wander peacefully, not searching, not worrying, just gently drifting. The way fallen leaves sometimes ride the surface of the water. The tram didn't stop at the park, but its presence lingered, like the memory of something comforting. Inside, everything settled another notch deeper. The quiet deepened, but not in a heavy way. It deepened the way a soft pillow deepens when you rest your head into it. The hum of the track became steadier. The lights inside dimmed slightly, not dark, just warmer. It felt almost as if the tram itself understood nighttime routines. First, slow the world outside, then soften the space inside, then let thoughts unravel gently. The narrator gently reminded the listener that there was nothing to do here, no task, no expectation, no path to follow except the one already laid out beneath the wheels. Whatever needed thinking could wait. Whatever felt unfinished did not need to be touched right now. There was only the tram, the city, and the quiet gift of breathing along with both. A subtle change came as the tram curved into one of the oldest parts of the city. Cobblestone streets lined the track here, and the buildings leaned slightly toward one another, as if sharing quiet secrets through the centuries. Flower boxes hung from window sills, even though the flowers themselves slept for the night. Their faint shape still added softness, like a memory of daylight gently preserved. The tram slowed again near a plaza, where a stone fountain stood at its center. The surface of the plaza stones reflected the lamplight, polished smooth by years of gentle footsteps. A cat crossed slowly from one side to the other, unhurried, peaceful, completely part of the scene. It paused briefly to look at the tram, curious but calm, then carried on, slipping into the shadows with a grace that matched the night perfectly. Nothing in the city hurried, nothing rushed, and the narrator let this truth settle deeply into the listener's breathing. You didn't need to hurry either. The tram's next stretch felt longer, a gentle glide through streets lined with tall trees, their branches arching overhead like a cathedral made entirely of leaves. Soft moonlight filtered through gaps in the canopy, scattering silver shapes across rooftops and sidewalks. The wind stirred just enough to create the faintest rustle, like pages turning slowly in a book someone loved. The narrator described the feeling of these streets, not with grand explanations, but with gentle details. The way shadows moved like slow water, the way every sound existed far apart from every other sound, the way silence wasn't empty, but full of rest. It was a kind of peacefulness that didn't demand anything in return. You didn't have to hold it. You didn't have to protect it. It was simply there, vast, steady, and trustworthy, like the night sky. As the tram continued, the city opened up slightly. A wide square came into view, framed by low buildings painted in soft colors that looked muted in the nighttime glow. There stood another clock, older, perhaps, than the one before. Its chime did not sound. It simply glowed with reassurance. Time is moving gently. Everything is allowed to unfold slowly. At the far edge of the square stood a greenhouse made almost entirely of glass. Soft light glowed from inside, faint, like the quiet pulse of a lantern. You could see silhouettes of plants inside, tall and leafy, resting peacefully. Even things that grew constantly, growing quietly, gently, invisibly, were allowed to pause for the night. The tram glided past. Inside, the quiet returned to the deepest level yet. Thoughts that once might have raced now moved softer, slower, less certain of their urgency. Some of them fell away completely. Others simply drifted to the back, content to wait. The narrator spoke gently about the act of traveling without effort, just sitting, just breathing, just letting the body feel held by the soft sway of the tram. Nothing needed fixing, no memory needed replaying, no conversation needed rehearsing. Sometimes the mind believes stillness is something earned, but here, in the sleeping city, stillness arrived simply because night had arrived, and that was enough. Ahead, faint bells rang in the distance. Not sharp, not loud, just soft chimes carried gently by air, like the echo of a lullaby sung somewhere far away, perhaps from a distant harbor, perhaps from a chapel tucked between quiet streets. The sound faded almost as soon as it appeared, leaving behind only a lingering softness, like a wave smoothing sand and then sliding quietly back into the sea. The tram passed through another small district where cafes lined the sidewalks. Chairs were stacked neatly. Tables were wiped clean, curtains drawn halfway as if whispering, "See you in the morning." There was something comforting in that ordinary promise. Life would return. The city would wake. Conversations and laughter and morning cups of coffee would eventually fill this space. But not yet, not now. For now, everything was inside the gentle hush that night creates when it extends itself generously across a resting world. The narrator guided attention back to breathing once more, not instructing, not directing, just softly noticing. In and out, slowly, easily, the chest rising with the same patience as the tram traveling along its tracks, the exhale floating downward like fog settling over river water. Nothing forced, nothing controlled, just a rhythm being allowed. The tram curved again, the graceful, looping motion of a route designed with care, and a quiet garden district appeared. Here, houses were spaced farther apart. Gardens framed their entrances with hedges trimmed in soft, rounded shapes. Stone lanterns glowed at the edges of walkways. Some windows held gentle golden squares of lamplight, not intrusive, not bright, just warm, like reminders that peaceful lives continued quietly inside. Occasionally, a curtain moved slightly as night air drifted through. A porch swing rocked very faintly in the breeze, as though it had once been set motion and simply forgot to stop. The tram moved through this area with particular gentleness, its wheels whispering along the rails. The narrator described it not as travel, but as passing through someone else's dream. A dream where every doorstep promised comfort, where every room behind every window carried warmth, where every path eventually led to someplace safe. Eventually, the line began its gentle arc toward the horizon beyond the main city center. Buildings grew lower, skies opened wider. Stars appeared more clearly, hundreds of them, scattered softly across the dark. The tram's lights created a soft halo around themselves, making the windows glow faintly outward. It felt like a vessel carrying travelers through both a city and a sky at the same time, grounded and yet floating. The narrator allowed silence to fill longer gaps between sentences. Not empty silencer, but restful silence. The kind that tells the nervous system that everything is okay. The ride continued at the same unhurried pace, offering reassurance not through words, not through advice, but simply by being calm itself. And as part two drifted toward its quiet close, the tram continued forward, deeper into the sleeping city, deeper into comfort, carrying the listener gently along with it, toward even softer places ahead. The tram glided onward, as steady as the moon drifting across the sky, unhurried, sure of its path, gentle in every movement. By now, the rhythm wasn't just outside anymore. It had settled into the body, into the breath, into the space where thoughts usually gathered. But tonight, thoughts had softened. They moved slower, like clouds drifting across a twilight horizon, changing shape quietly and dissolving without effort. Outside, the night continued to unfold. Neighborhoods grew softer, more spaced apart. The city seemed to loosen, like a book opening to its quietest chapters. Trees lined the edges of the track, their branches arching overhead, forming tunnels of leaves where the moonlight rested gently. It felt almost like entering a place the world kept especially for peaceful nights. Not hidden, just overlooked during busy hours. A calm sense of permission filled the air. It was okay to slow down. It was okay to let go. It was okay to feel the simple beauty of moving through the night without needing to be anywhere else. The tram hummed with its familiar sound, that soft lullaby of wheels over rails. Inside, everything remained bathed in warm light, the hue of lamps that don't rush you, the subtle glow that tells the nervous system, nothing here demands anything from you. You could almost feel the wooden panels along the carriage walls, holding memories of countless quiet journeys. They had carried people through nights of reflection, nights of rest, nights when silence became a comfort rather than an emptiness. The narrator's voice gently described small details, not to fill the silence, but to invite attention to soften. The polished brass that framed the windows, the delicate stitching on the seats, the soft hum below the floor, steady, reassuring, like a heart that beats because it knows it should. Nothing in the tram felt new, but nothing felt worn either. It felt lived in, trusted, familiar, in the way comforting spaces sometimes feel familiar even when you've never seen them before. Outside, the track curved toward a district built along gently rolling hills. Houses here followed the land instead of reshaping it. They stood at slight angles, steps rising slowly to front doors framed by lanterns and vines. The tram slowed, not stopping, just drifting more gently. A small observatory stood on one of the hills. Its round dome was open just a little, pointing a telescope toward the open sky. There were no scientists bustling about, only the quiet silhouette of the structure itself, patient and still, simply looking upward. The narrator spoke softly about the comfort that comes from distant stars. They didn't rush. They didn't push. They simply existed, silent witnesses to countless nights like this one. And suddenly, the idea felt soothing. Not every moment has to be filled. Not every night needs to solve anything. Some nights were made for watching the world exhale. The tram followed its gentle incline up a hill, its motor humming quietly. As it ascended, the view broadened. The sleeping city spread beneath, painted in layers of soft lights and deeper shadows. It looked less like a place of business and schedules and clocks, and more like a living, breathing constellation. Rooftops glimmered faintly. Roads traced out graceful lines like paths in a dream. The river reflected the stars above, so that the sky seemed to repeat itself across the earth. The narrator allowed silence again, letting the scene rest on its own. Because sometimes the most calming thing isn't what's said, but what doesn't need to be spoken. You could simply sit and see and feel the deep, quiet reassurance of night spread out around you. As the tram reached the crest of the hill, a wide meadow appeared, unexpected and gentle, as though someone had set aside this open space just so the city could breathe. Tall grass swayed gently in the nighttime air. Small wildflowers nodded in soft motion. Beyond the meadow, wooden fences stood quietly, marking boundaries that seemed more symbolic than strict. A single windmill rotated slowly, its blades turning with a sound so faint it seemed part of the wind itself. The tram didn't stop, but it didn't hurry past either. It drifted along a curve that traced the edge of the meadow, giving the sense of floating around the border of a dream. The narrator described the meadow as a place that gathered leftover thoughts from the day, not to keep them, not to amplify them, but to let them dissolve gently. Thoughts entered, they softened, they drifted away. The mind didn't have to force them out, it simply watched them lose weight. The tram descended the far side of the hill, easing back into gentle valley streets. Soft chimneys rose from rooftops here, and faint wisps of night air curled around them. Along one stretch, there was a narrow pedestrian bridge made of old stone, arching across the track. Vines climbed it lovingly, as if they had been growing toward it for decades. Lanterns hung from its sides. They didn't blaze, they glowed, the way memories glow when recalled gently. The tram's lights brushed the underside of the bridge as it passed beneath, creating a brief warm halo before slipping onward. It felt like crossing through a doorway built entirely from quiet. Inside, the narrator shifted attention inward for a moment, not with instruction, not with pressure, simply an invitation. Notice how the body feels heavier against the seat. Notice how the breath has become deeper without trying. Notice how the mind drifts in slow circles, softened by comfort rather than driven by worry. This wasn't a story that moved forward urgently. It was a story that stayed beside you, like a companion whose presence required no conversation. You were allowed to rest here. You were allowed to be silent here. You were allowed to simply feel safe. And in the slow music of the tram's motion, reassurance lived quietly. Ahead, the city shifted again, not dramatically, but gently, like a dream shifting scenes. Shops gave way to small workshops. Windows revealed tools hung neatly. Wooden tables wiped clean after quiet evening work. Bicycles leaned against walls, as though waiting patiently for morning. A sign over one door reedy, Night Harbor Carpentry, letters curved with care, painted by someone who loved slow craftsmanship. Another shop displayed hand-crafted lanterns in its window. Their glass panes reflected the tram as it passed, each lantern glowing softly from within. Even places where effort once happened now seemed to rest. Work did not vanish, but it wasn't looming or impatient. It was simply paused, saved for a time meant for energy, not for stillness. A gentle drizzle began, not a storm, not a disruption, just a fine mist that whispered against the windows. Raindrops traced delicate lines, sliding down the glass, merging into quiet streams before disappearing at the edges. The tram kept gliding, unaffected, serene, its roof carrying the soft patter like a lullaby layered over the rhythm of the rails. The narrator described rain not as something to notice sharply, but as something to feel around. It wrapped the city with softness. It blurred harsh lines. It gave the night a soothing texture. Each drop seemed like a tiny reminder. Release, unwind. Let tonight be simple. The tram approached a station, small, hardly more than a platform and a shelter. It paused gently, doors opening with a soft, respectful sigh. No one stepped off. No one stepped on. And still, the stop felt meaningful, as though the tram had paused out of courtesy, giving night its own rhythm, honoring slowness itself. Across from the platform stood a large mural painted across a building wall. It depicted a night scene very much like this one. A train gliding, a city sleeping, stars glowing quietly above. The narrator smiled in their voice, acknowledging the circular beauty. A picture of the night inside the night itself. Layers of calm reflecting back upon each other. The doors closed without hurry. The tram continued. Now the district ahead carried hints of the coast, even though the sea remained out of sight. You could feel it in the wider streets, in faint salt carried on night air, in the way the wind moved, long and steady. There were warehouses built low and wide, their roofs like resting shoulders. Dim lights glimmered above sliding doors, offering just enough glow for quiet comfort. Farther off, faint fog gathered, rolling in slow waves along the ground. and the tram moved through it carefully, not fighting it, not resisting, simply letting the fog part around it like a curtain of dreams. Inside the fog, sounds softened further. The hum of the engine felt rounder, muted, even slower than before. You could imagine the world outside wrapped in cotton, every edge replaced by something gentle. The narrator let this quiet stretch longer than usual, because sometimes the calmest stories are the ones that trust silence to do the soothing. Eventually, the fog thinned, and beyond it appeared a long stretch of track running beside gardens arranged in terraces. Each terrace held rows of trees, olive, fig, small orange trees, their leaves shining slightly beneath the lanterns that illuminated the path. Stone steps connected each level, and along the edges grew small herbs whose scents, rosemary, lavender, traveled lightly on the air. The tram didn't enter the gardens, but followed their border, moving at a speed that felt respectful, almost reverent. The narrator spoke about how these gardens had been planted long ago with patience, that every tree had taken time to grow, that nothing beautiful in this landscape had been forced. The lesson was not spoken aloud, but it lingered. Good things unfold gently. Rest is part of growth. Quiet moments are not empty, they are nourishment. After the gardens, the track curved back towards soft residential lanes. These houses felt different from those earlier, more modern, but still warm. Large windows revealed spacious rooms with shelves full of books, soft rugs spread across wooden floors, lamps dimmed low for evening. On one porch, a lantern flickered gently beside a pair of shoes left neatly by the door. On another, a wind chime swayed slowly, producing tones so delicate they barely registered, more felt than heard. The tram passed along this stretch as though moving through a gallery of quiet lives, each moment ordinary, each one peaceful. There was something deeply reassuring in that ordinariness. Sleep stories often travel through extraordinary realms, mountains of dreams, oceans of imagination. But here, comfort came from something simpler, a night where everyday life rests, a night where nothing demands improvement, a night where being alive, breathing, and present is enough. Inside, the narrator returned gently to the listener. If a thought drifted through, it was acknowledged kindly, then allowed to dissolve back into the soft rhythm of movement. The tram's sound had become familiar by now, almost like white noise shaped into something personal. It wasn't just background, it was invitation. Each stretch of track said, "Stay, breathe, let everything soften." And with each passing moment, the idea of sleep did not feel like a task. It felt like a tide slowly rising, natural, inevitable kind. Ahead, a small lake appeared, round and still, bordered by willows whose branches dipped slightly into the water. The tram glided along a curve that followed the lake's edge. The surface reflected not only the stars, but also the soft arc of the tram windows, creating a moving ribbon of light across the water. Somewhere near the far bank, a pair of ducks rested, feathers tucked gently under wings. Ripples spread outward slowly when one shifted, then faded again, returning the surface to perfect calm. A wooden pier stretched out toward the center of the lake, and an unoccupied rowboat rocked gently at its end, tied loosely as if dreaming of gentle drifting. Everything in the scene felt suspended, held softly between one breath and the next. The narrator spoke quietly. Sometimes the most healing thing is not to reach for anything more, but to let the moment hold you exactly where you already are. The tram continued past the lake and entered a quiet stretch of countryside woven into the city's edge. Wild grasses returned. Stone walls followed the track in uneven lines. Small lanterns hung from posts, spaced far apart, letting darkness exist between them rather than trying to chase it away. The stars grew brighter here. The sky became deeper, the faint glow of the city dimming behind. The narrator let the pace of the words slow even more, matching the sense of space widening outward. A gentle truth spread through the ride. Nighttime didn't have to be filled with thought. It could be filled with presence, with breath, with softness, with the feel of a journey that exists only to soothe. And as part 3 drifted toward its close, the tram continued forward, steady and caring, carrying the listener deeper into peace, deeper into stillness, deeper into the comforting heart of the sleeping city. The tram continued its quiet passage, more like a drifting cloud now than a machine moving on rails. Every vibration had softened. Every sound had turned into a gentle background whisper, something the night itself seemed to hum. Somewhere inside, a sense of being carried took hold more deeply, not driven, not transported with urgency, simply carried. It felt like the night had taken responsibility for everything for a while. The mind didn't need to plan anymore. The heart didn't need to hold up anything heavy. The body could simply lean back and allow itself to be tended to by motion and quiet and time. The narrator's voice moved in the same slow rhythm, almost like a companion walking beside someone who is very tired, matching their pace, never rushing ahead. Outside the windows, the countryside slowly merged with the edges of the sleeping city again, not with contrast, but with soft blending. Buildings returned, but they felt different now, as though they had also taken a long, deep breath. Here, the tram entered one of the oldest neighborhoods along its route, a place the city kept like a treasured memory. Cobblestone streets, curved gently through rows of stone houses. Balconies leaned just slightly above the road, overflowing with vines that draped lazily over their railings. Iron lamps, shaped by hands long gone, glowed with a mellow amber light. Nothing in this quarter shouted for attention. Everything simply existed quietly, with dignity and peace. The rails themselves seemed older, their metal worn to a soft shine from years of evening journeys. As the tram crossed them, the sound wasn't harsh. It had the soft musicality of something familiar and well used. The narrator spoke of memory, not memory as longing, not as ache, but as something warm and gently grounding. Places remember rest if they've seen enough nights. They gather stillness the way trees gather rings, slowly, calmly, layer by layer. And this neighborhood felt layered with countless quiet nights. Nights of windows softly lit. Nights when shutters whispered closed. Nights when footsteps faded down gentle streets and silence settled like a blanket. The tram belonged here like an old friend. A small plaza appeared ahead, not large, not grand, but deeply peaceful. At its center stood an old stone fountain, its water trickling so softly that the sound lingered in the air like a hush. The water didn't leap or splash. It slipped, slow, continuous, patient. The tram eased alongside the plaza and slowed almost to a graceful drift. It didn't need to stop for anyone. It simply allowed the moment to open, as though the fountain deserved its own time. A circle of benches surrounded the fountain. On each one lay small signs of daytime life: a forgotten scarf, a closed book, a folded newspaper. Nothing disorderly, just gentle traces of presence. The narrator described how the plaza seemed to hold all the leftover feelings of the day: worries, hurried conversations, decisions, and how night gently washed over them the way water washed over stone, softening, rounding edges, letting things wait. Not everything must be solved now. Some things simply need to rest. The tram moved on again, taking that same truth with it, a truth that seeped inward quietly. Beyond the plaza, the track curved beneath archways that connected buildings overhead. The arches created brief shaded passages, tunnels of shadow and soft echo where the gentle hum of the tram sounded slightly deeper, wrapped in stone. One archway opened suddenly into a wide street with trees planted along both sides, tall, graceful trees brushing against one another in the mild night breeze. Their leaves whispered together, creating a soft chorus. Not loud, not rustling, just a delicate hush. The lamps along the boulevard cast pools of warm light around each trunk. Between them, darkness lingered, but it didn't feel hollow. It felt inviting, like the cool side of a pillow. Beneath one tree, a bicycle rested against the trunk, as though its rider had left it there with perfect trust. knowing it would be exactly where it belonged in the morning. The narrator smiled gently in their words, as if acknowledging how calming trust can be. Trust in morning, trust in rest, trust that stepping away is safe. The tram glided forward, and the boulevard slowly gave way to a quiet square bordered by buildings with large windows and soft curtains. This place felt like the city's living room. Cafes lined one side, their tables stacked neatly, chairs tucked in, lights dimmed to an evening glow. Behind their windows, chalkboards displayed menus written with care, not shouting discounts, not rushing customers, just inviting them gently. Nearby stood a bakery. Even closed, it offered comfort. Faint traces of baked bread and vanilla lingered outside its door. A wooden sign hung by a rope, shifting slightly in the breeze with a soft creak. Not an alarming sound, simply another slow rhythm. Above the bakery, a cat slept curled on a windowsill, tail wrapped neatly around its body. Its breathing matched the rhythm of the tram, slow, steady, untroubled. The narrator lingered here, letting the image do the work. Calm has a way of spreading when seen. It reminds the body how to mirror it. And gradually, awareness of the tram seat, of the floor's quiet vibration, of the weight in the limbs, all deepened. You were still present, but more relaxed now, as though the night had laid a soft hand across tired thoughts and whispered, "Die. You can rest now." Farther along, the tram approached an open air market square, empty at this hour, yet abundantly peaceful. Stalls stood folded, awnings tied down, barrels and crates sat neatly stacked, waiting without impatience. The flagstones still held traces of the day's warmth. Overhead, strings of small lights crossed the square in graceful arcs. Some stayed lit, but dimmed to a delicate glow. Their light shimmered gently, swaying slightly in the soft nighttime air. A clock tower rose at the corner, its face illuminated, hands moving not urgently, but quietly doing what they always did. The tram rolled near the market and lingered at its slowest pace. The narrator did not draw attention to time. Instead, they let the movement feel like an unhurried conversation between now and later. No countdown, no deadlines. Just the sense that every moment was not something to manage. It was something to simply experience while passing through. The clock chimed softly, not loud enough to break the calm, only enough to remind that night unfolds in gentle intervals. And the tram continued. Beyond the market, the rails traveled parallel to a quiet river once again. But this stretch felt different than earlier. Here, the river moved with deliberate calm, wide and reflective. Stone pathways ran along both sides, lined with benches at generous intervals, each one angled just slightly toward the water, as though designed for contemplation. Bridges arched across at elegant intervals. their reflections forming complete circles in the water below. The tram's lights brushed the surface of the river, creating ripples of gold that stretched outward, then dissolved softly back into stillness. It was like watching thoughts appear, widen, fade, without effort. The narrator gently encouraged noticing that rhythm, not as instruction, more like observation. How even flowing water doesn't rush everywhere at once. How some parts move quickly while others linger, circling lazily near the edges. And how both movements, the drifting and the stillness, belong. So, too, with the mind. The rails eventually led the tram toward an area filled with gardens once again. But these were different from the terraced orchards earlier. These gardens felt curated for peace alone. Stone pathways curved between flower beds designed not for bright display, but for gentleness, lavender, night, blooming jasmine, pale roses whose scents traveled quietly on the wind. Water features murmured softly in hidden corners. Low lanterns illuminated benches nestled beneath arching trellises. The tram rolled along the garden edge like a respectful observer. Inside, somewhere, a caretaker had likely tended these paths earlier in the evening, sweeping, trimming, arranging, not to impress, but to make walking here soothing. The night breeze carried traces of floral calm into the tram through the subtle shifts of air at the door seams. The narrator lingered here, breathing the space in with their words. It was easy to imagine stepping from the tram and feeling stone underfoot, hearing water, smelling lavender, feeling the gentle cool of nighttime leaves. And yet, staying in the carriage was just as peaceful. Sometimes imagined rest is enough for the nervous system to soften. The brain doesn't always distinguish between real calm and vividly felt calm. And this story created room for both. The tram followed a wide arc and gently climbed again, easing toward another hill, smaller than before, but crowned with a building that immediately felt special. It was not a grand landmark or imposing structure. It resembled a library, tall windows, wooden doors, architecture marked by quiet care. But its sign read, Night Reading House. Soft lamps glowed through the curtains, and inside, shelves stretched upward filled with books bound in deep blues, soft browns, and worn gold. The narrator described how people sometimes came here simply to sit in comfortable armchairs and read slowly until sleepiness began to loosen their thoughts. Not to finish a book, not to push through chapters, just to spend time with words the way one spends time with gentle rain, letting meaning arrive when it wished. As the tram passed, the building felt like a sanctuary beyond the sanctuary of the ride, a place where minds could put down their burdens in quiet company. And that sense of layered safety deepened something within. Here is a city that understands rest. here is a world that does not ask you to prove anything tonight. Descending the small hill again, the tram entered a district bordered by rows of tall willow trees whose branches draped like curtains around the tracks. The leaves brushed lightly against the carriage sides in certain spots, producing the softest of whispers. Moonlight filtered through in pale ribbons, moving across the tram interior as shifting patterns. For a stretch, the world outside became mostly leaves and light, patterns, movement, stillness woven into motion. The narrator let their voice fall nearly to a whisper, acknowledging that this part of the journey held something deeply lulling, almost hypnotic, the mind watching light ripple and leaves sway, gradually surrendered the last bits of resistance to slowing down. Thoughts still appeared, but they were like small birds perched quietly in branches, not darting anxiously from place to place, simply resting. Beyond the willow corridor, the tram emerged slowly onto a long bridge that rose gently over a wide expanse, river and city stretching beneath in equal balance. From this vantage, rooftops layered into the horizon, each one a slightly different shade of night. The stars shimmered above, their reflections shimmered below, and the tram felt suspended, traveling across the space between worlds. The narrator spoke about between places, bridges, twilight, midnight journeys, as spaces where nothing demands decision, moments where life is allowed simply to carry you, and you are allowed simply to receive the carrying. The bridge seemed to last forever, though the tram moved steadily forward. Time slipped into something softer, not lost, just unimportant. What mattered was the glow inside the carriage, the quiet outside, and the sense that each passing minute deepened peace rather than spending it. As the bridge ended and solid ground returned, a sense of nearing something, not a conclusion, but a serene culmination, gently arose. The tram curved into an area filled with low buildings set apart by stretches of open land where grasses shimmered under moonlight. Wind moved slowly through them. They swayed in long waves like the surface of a sleeping ocean. A wooden sign appeared beside the track, painted simply with elegant letters. Still Meadow Crossing. The narrator smiled softly through the name. Names can be comforting. They tell you someone thought carefully about a place. The meadow stretched outward in all directions, not wild, not manicured, simply allowed to exist as it wished. It carried the feeling of deep acceptance. And as the tram glided quietly along the edge, it felt like entering the heart of the night, not dark, not mysterious, just profoundly calm. The narrator invited one more breath, slow, unforced. Inhale like the meadow receiving wind. Exhale like tall grasses bowing gently. And then let even awareness of breathing fade slightly again. The tram rolled on, peaceful, steady, endlessly gentle, carrying the listener farther into the softest layers of night, into a place where rest did not need to be earned, where peace simply welcomed anyone who wandered near. The tram moved forward with the grace of something that no longer belonged entirely to time. Its wheels hummed along tracks polished by decades of nighttime journeys, carrying stories, wishes, and quiet thoughts. Outside, the city looked softer than ever, as though morning was thinking about waking up, but had decided to wait a little longer, giving the night one final chance to comfort those still awake. The lights along the avenues shimmered faintly, like stars that had drifted down to rest on lampposts and rooftops. Curtains breathed gently in the barely, their breeze. Balconies held forgotten pots of herbs, drying laundry, wind chimes that sang only when the wind felt tender. Somewhere, a bakery oven glowed, warming the brick walls around it and whispering promises of tomorrow's bread. Inside the tram, everything had grown slower, the rhythm, the air, the thoughts. The windows were pale with dew, blurring the world into soft watercolor strokes. The seats were warm from the presence of passengers who had sat, breathed deeply, and allowed themselves to let go of worries they had carried throughout the day. The lamps above gave off a golden light, neither bright nor dim, just enough to be kind. And the city, that great and gentle sleeper, wrapped itself around the tram like a blanket. The conductor stood with one hand resting on the rail, eyes still warm, still knowing. Their voice, steady, unhurried, drifted through the carriage when they finally spoke. Every tram has a quiet mile, they said, a stretch where nothing asks for answers anymore. You could feel it even before the words finished settling. The quiet mile. The tracks curved slightly, taking the tram along a part of the city that felt hidden, almost secret. Tall trees arched overhead, their branches touching like fingers, and the leaves rustled in the light night air in whispered conversations that had lasted hundreds of seasons. Beneath them, the tram glided through a path lined with cobblestones, gardens, and walls covered in ivy. The moonlight caught the edges of leaves, turning them silver. A cat slept on a doorstep. A pair of bicycles leaned against an iron fence, as though resting after a long day. No traffic, no horns, no rushing feet. Only the sound of the tram breathing through the night. A feeling filled the carriage, something like being held gently, like being told, without words, that you were allowed to stop chasing thoughts, just for a while. The kind of peace that doesn't demand anything from you. The kind that simply sits beside you and waits. You noticed your shoulders loosen, your jaw soften, your breathing deepen. The quiet mile had a way of doing that, untying knots you didn't realize you had tied. As the tram floated onward, Every detail around you felt like part of a lullaby. A street lamp curved over the tracks like a guardian, casting circles of light that the tram passed through slowly, one after another. Each circle slipped gently across the seats, across the windows, across your hands, like small blessings being placed carefully where they were needed. In a courtyard, a stone fountain murmured barely audible water, a hushed trickle meant for night listeners only. An open window held a sheer curtain that moved as if breathing with the rhythm of sleep. The distant sound of the river threaded through everything, soft and low, like the world's calmest heartbeat. Inside the tram, the conductor checked a clock that no longer seemed connected to minutes or hours. They smiled quietly. "We don't measure this part," they said. "People don't need to know how long peace lasts, only that it arrives." And it was true, time felt gentle here. Thoughts that once raced now walked. Memories that once pulled now floated. The day, with all its tasks and noise and spinning moments, dissolved into something like mist. What remained was presence, breath, the soft sway of the tram, the glow of quiet lamps. You didn't need to solve anything anymore. You didn't need to revisit conversations or replay choices or follow every wandering what if. You were allowed to rest inside the moment. That was enough. The tram eventually came out from beneath the arching trees, gliding past a quiet square paved with stone. In its center stood an old clock tower, tall, elegant, dignified. Yet its hands had stopped long ago. Still, the roofs around it leaned inward, respectful, as though honoring a kind elder whose wisdom didn't depend on accuracy. Some nights, maybe tonight, people who couldn't sleep might walk here, sit beneath that tower, and listen to the stillness until it softened something inside them. The tram had carried many of them there over the years, letting their thoughts gently unwind between stations. And tonight it carried you. The conductor glanced toward the tower and gave a small nod, as if greeting an old friend. "Not everything has to keep up," they said softly. "Some things exist just to remind us how to slow down." The words drifted across the tram, not as advice, but as a simple observation, like pointing out a constellation. You didn't feel lectured. You felt accompanied. Soon the tram followed the riverbank again, where the water had turned into a long ribbon of moonlit silver. Reflections of bridges shimmered across the surface, dissolving every time a soft current passed through, patterns appearing, disappearing, then appearing again, without urgency. You watched them without effort, watched the world shift peacefully, watched your thoughts match its rhythm. A distant bell chimed once, not loud, not demanding attention, just a gentle note floating into the night, as though time itself wanted to speak softly as well. The conductor slowed the tram slightly, not because of any obstacle, but because slowing felt right here, like walking quietly through a sleeping room. "We're approaching the last curve," they said, "the place where most people feel the weight lift." And indeed, the tracks ahead formed a sweeping arc that followed the river into a part of the city where buildings gave way to open views. The horizon widened. The sky became enormous and kind. It was the type of curve that felt like exhaling. The tram leaned into it gently, not a tug, not a tilt, just enough motion to remind you that forward could be peaceful. That endings didn't always mean loss, that sometimes the last stretch of a journey was where the most softness lived. A field appeared beside the tracks, unexpected, quiet, silvered with dew. Wildflowers dotted the grass like tiny lanterns. A few trees stood at its edges, keeping watch. Fireflies drifted lazily above the ground, glowing in and out as though practicing the language of stars. The conductor opened a side window slightly. Cool night air slipped in slowly, clean, fresh, touched with the scent of wet earth and distant blooming blossoms. The breeze brushed across your face, across your hands, across every place where tension had once lived. Nothing rushed. Nothing required reaction. The tram simply glided through the night, carrying that soft air with it like a blessing. "You'd be surprised," the conductor said, "how many heavy thoughts become light when given space." They weren't asking you to release anything. They were simply reminding you that letting go doesn't always happen by force. Sometimes letting go happens by drifting, by being carried somewhere quieter, by finally having nothing around you that pushes your mind to hurry, and you noticed, not suddenly, but gradually, that things you'd been holding all day no longer clung so tightly. They rested, they softened. Some of them grew smaller, like distant shapes on a shoreline you were gently sailing away from. The tram entered one final stretch, a lane lined with old lanterns that curved overhead like a constellation-shaped pathway. This was the last part of the night journey. The lamps glowed low, as if they understood it was nearly time for dreams to take over. The tracks hummed more slowly now. The windows reflected the interior light, merging your image with the night beyond until everything felt part of one single calm picture. Ahead, you could see the terminal, not busy, not crowded, just peaceful. A small station made of stone and wood, with benches smoothed over by decades of waiting, and a little canopy roof that looked like it had listened to thousands of stories. A clock above the door ticked with a soft, gentle sound, not as a command, but as a lull. The conductor looked toward it, then back at you. "This tram doesn't end sleep," they said quietly. "It simply brings you close enough that dreams can find you." The words felt right. The tram slowed slower still. And in that slow glide, everything aligned, the rhythm of the wheels, the breath in your chest, the softness in your eyes. A sensation of quiet gratitude filled the air, not loud or dramatic, just calm, like the feeling one has when setting something down gently. The doors opened with a whisper. Cool night air lingered outside, holding the faintest echo of rain far away and the promise of dawn that wasn't in any hurry. You imagined stepping off, not into noise, not into bright lights, but into a place where the night would continue to cradle thoughts until sleep arrived fully. A place where benches welcomed you, where the ground felt steady beneath your feet, where the silence had depth and kindness. The conductor tipped their cap slightly. "Rest well," they murmured. "The city will keep watch." And there was something beautiful about knowing that while you rested, something larger, quieter, and endlessly patient would be out there, humming gently along the tracks, keeping the night company. The tram waited a moment longer, just long enough. Then, as if not wanting to disturb your drifting thoughts, it began to move again, empty now, yet full of all the softness it had carried. It slipped down another line, disappearing into the hushed distance, ready for another soul wandering the night. You felt lighter, safer, more at ease than you had in a long time. The city, so big by day, felt small, friendly, and warm. The night folded over it like a blanket tucked carefully at the edges. The stars watched quietly. The river whispered. The lanterns glowed steadily, promising continuity. And somewhere inside that promising, or your thoughts began to fade, or your breathing deepened. And the midnight tram rolled on, unseen now, but still gliding through the sleeping city, keeping pace with your dreams, gently, endlessly, softly, long after your eyes had closed. The city has grown quieter now, not because anything has vanished, but because everything has softened into its truest nighttime shape, gentle, slow, unhurried. The echoes of the midnight tram linger only as a feeling now, like the faint impression of warmth after a comforting blanket has been laid down. You are no longer traveling. You are simply resting, and the world around you has lovingly agreed to slow with you. Outside, the sky stretches wide and patient. Somewhere clouds drift in lazy formation, as though the night itself has decided there is no reason to hurry. Far below, rooftops settle into stillness, windows dim, and the last few streetlights glow like guardians who understand silence more than words. Nothing presses in, nothing demands. Nothing chases your thoughts anymore. You are finally in a place meant only for peace. Let your mind drift the same way the tram drifted through its final curve, smoothly, without effort. Thoughts may wander in, like quiet passengers who appear at a station, stay for a moment, and then continue on their way. There is no need to invite them to sit. There is no need to push them out. They will pass on their own. Every breath you take now settles the night a little more. In and out gently, kindly, like the soft rhythm of wheels gliding along tracks beneath distant stars. The breath doesn't need to be deep. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be yours, carried in time with the slow, calming hush of the world. With each exhale, something loosens, not forced, not pulled, just released the way dusk releases daylight, naturally, quietly, without struggle. The weight of the day eases further away. The conversations you replayed earlier grow faint. The questions that once tangled together begin to fade like mist dissolving in the soft glow of morning light. You don't have to solve anything here. Not tonight. Not in this moment. Rest does not ask for explanations. Rest simply welcomes you. Imagine now the echo of the midnight tram moving somewhere far off, still gliding, still humming, still tracing the calm outline of the sleeping city. It doesn't need you to steer. It doesn't need you to watch. It is simply traveling peacefully, carrying the last bits of your worry with it. Let it go where it needs to go. Let it take the hurried pieces of the day and scatter them gently across the quiet, where they can dissolve into stillness. They don't belong on your shoulders as you sleep. They belong outside, under the moon, being rocked slowly by the rhythm of the rails. And you belong here, here in the softness, here in the gentle safety of night, here where the world is allowed to rest beside you. Feel the support beneath you, the bed, the pillow, the blanket, each one working patiently with gravity, holding you the way the city holds its sleeping rooftops. Stable, quiet, sure, there is nothing uncertain here. Everything beneath you says the same simple thing. You are safe enough to rest. Your body understands this long before your thoughts do. Muscles soften, hands grow heavier, breath grows slower. The mind begins to drift between waking and sleep, that beautiful twilight space where everything kind turns to whisper. If a memory appears, it grows softer at the edges. If a thought tries to speak too loudly, it becomes slow and fluffy and harmless, like a cloud floating across a nighttime sky. Here, even your imagination learns to move gently. It does not need vivid pictures. It does not need to create stories. It only needs to let the night cradle it, the way the tram cradled its passengers as it slid through lamplit streets. Beyond your window, real or imagined, the world remains steady. Somewhere a river flows quietly, patient as breath. Somewhere a leaf trembles lightly on a branch and then rests again. Somewhere a bell waits until morning to ring, respecting the silence that belongs to night. And the city, awake earlier, full of plans and lists and noise, now lies under a blanket of stars, letting the quiet become its caretaker, just like you are letting sleep become yours. There is profound kindness in this pause, a kindness that doesn't need words or promises or certainty. It is simply the understanding that the human heart needs softness, that an overworked mind needs stillness, that the body does its best healing when the world dims low and asks nothing more from it. You have earned this pause. You deserve this quiet. You may stay here as long as you wish. If the tram returns to your thoughts, it returns gently. A memory of glowing windows moving through shadows like a dream drifting across deeper dream. You can imagine it visiting neighborhoods it has known forever, nodding respectfully to sleeping buildings, passing under bridges where time slows even further, and disappearing into the distance with the calm grace of something that was always meant to soothe. It will continue its silent journey through the night, keeping watch on paths you no longer need to travel. And in its place, sleep rises to meet you, not suddenly, not all at once, but gradually, like nightfall spreading across the last stretch of dusk. It comes with warmth. It comes with patience. It comes without pressure. You may let your eyes grow heavier now. You may let your breathing find its slow, natural rhythm. You may allow the soft darkness behind your eyelids to feel welcoming, like the inside of a cozy room lit by one gentle lamp. There is nothing else to reach for. You are already where you need to be. The night will keep circling the city. The stars will keep shining whether you see them or not. The river will continue whispering to the bridges. Somewhere, a quiet tram will glide past a sleeping square and tip its lights toward the clock tower, honoring the way time softens when rest finally arrives. And you will sleep, calmly, warmly, wrapped in the steady reassurance that nothing important will be lost while you rest, and everything you need to carry can wait patiently until morning light touches the world again. For now, let the journey fade. Let the story dissolve into dream, and allow the gentle hush of night to hold you completely.